Welcome to the verse-by-verse study of the book of Proverbs. We shall finish chapter 21 today, beginning with verse 16. Whoever strays from the path or the way of prudence comes to rest in the company of the dead. Recall last week in verse 5, God's wisdom warned us that haste leads to poverty. Likewise, Proverbs 10:4, laziness leads to poverty. Both of these are an example of the absence of prudence. To be imprudent means to be careless, to be rash, to be not concerned about the future consequences of our actions. Here we have God's wisdom telling us that the way of prudence is a daily choice. And it's a choice that leads to a life that is abundant and fruitful, as opposed to a lack of prudence leads to the opposite. More practical advice about our choices. Whoever loves or prioritizes pleasure will become poor. Whoever loves wine and olive oil will never be rich. If our first choice becomes pleasure over our own health, over our family, over our career, that too will lead to poverty. Poverty not only financially, but emotionally and spiritually. When you and I become selfish and we choose to be consumed and controlled by our pleasures at the expense of everything else, that will not end well. The two examples cited here are drinking and gluttony. But it could be any activity that begins to imprudently dominate our lives. The wicked become a ransom, a payment for the righteous, and the unfaithful for the upright. All sin, every sin in this world will be atoned. There will be a reckoning and a payment, a just payment. The wicked will be held accountable. The faithful righteous will be spared, not because of our deeds, but because of what Christ did on the cross. Next, better to live in a desert than with a quarrelsome and nagging wife. This, you recall, is basically a repeat of the earlier verse we had in 21:9, and also we shall see it again in chapter 25. The wisdom is that one should be careful in choosing a spouse. Wisdom says choosing a person with beauty on the inside who is supportive and encouraging, as opposed to someone that is always complaining and nagging, self-centered, would be a much better, wiser choice. The wise store choice food and olive oil, but fools gulp, squander theirs down. This is a reference to comparing a saver versus a spender. Wealth is created from disciplined saving, not from consumption. Now next we have a powerful promise that in many ways sums up all of Proverbs. Whoever pursues righteousness and love finds three things: life, prosperity, and honor. Those that choose to pursue God's wisdom, they are promised three blessed outcomes. First, life, meaning abundant, purposeful life. Next, prosperity. Here it means peace and joy, and that our material needs are also met. And lastly, honor, to be able to walk freely, upright, without the burden of guilt and regret. Jesus promised the same in the book of Matthew. Those that hunger for righteousness will be filled, will be blessed. The good news of this verse also is that the word is pursue. That word is not perfect. Every Christian who is walking with Christ will indeed sometimes stumble. And the test is, do we get up and continue that path? One who is wise can go up against the city of the mighty and pull down the stronghold in which they trust. The proverb is saying that God's wisdom will always win out over the worldly mighty. Putting our trust in God is a much better choice than putting our trust solely in our own might, our own strength. Next, a repeated warning to prudently manage our mouth. Those who guard their mouths and their tongues keep themselves from calamity. This word guard means to exercise care over what we say and how we say it. Imprudent words, careless words, can cause harm to ourselves and to others. Next, the proud and arrogant person, mocker is his name, behaves with insolent fury. Could also be translated insolent pride. As we've discussed before, this mocker is a person that's hostile to God. He is hostile to God's wisdom and hostile to God's followers. God warned in the last days we would see more and more mockers, which is certainly happening today. The mocker is arrogant, close-minded. They lack tolerance, grace, love, and humility. They have a high opinion of themselves and an unkind attitude to anyone that does not agree with them. Next, a repeated warning. The craving of a sluggard or lazy will be the death of him because his hands refuse to work. Again, this word craving or desire means a choice. Laziness is indeed a choice, an imprudent choice that always ends badly. The next verse, 26, is linked to the previous verse. All day long he, this sluggard, craves for more, but the righteous give without sparing. The point is that the lazy will decline into a state of ever-increasing want as their poverty increases, while the diligent or the righteous will have plenty and have a heart to share. The sacrifice of the wicked is detestable to God. How much more so when brought with evil intent. This word sacrifice could also be translated good deeds. As we said before, God cares much more about how we live than how much we give. Good deeds here means done with bad motives. Even worship does not please God, which he calls it detestable or an abomination when it has the wrong intent, motivation. Intent means we're doing a good deed for selfish reasons, and sometimes with evil intent. An example would be we're helping a neighbor only to gain their trust so that later we can use that trust to take advantage. A false witness will perish, but a careful listener will testify successfully. Lying is also detestable to God and will not go unpunished, as we see here, especially when it's done as a witness or someone is intently harming someone else. Likewise, God will bless the honest testifier, the one that carefully listens and speaks only to the truth. Again, we have a contrast between the wicked and the upright or the righteous. The wicked put up a bold front, or literally a bold face, but the upright give thought to their ways. The wicked are stubborn and close-hearted typically, in both their attitude and actions. It's either their way or highway. No room to listen, to reason, nor correction. As opposed to the upright, who are to be humble and to be open to give careful, prayerful thought to instruction and advice. Another powerful promise. There is no wisdom, no insight, no plan that can succeed against the Lord. There are many worldly wise people in this world, but God is saying that any worldly wisdom or insight or plan that attempts to compromise, to undermine, to circumvent God's wisdom is destined to fail. Our final verse. The horse is made ready for the day of battle, but victory rests with the Lord. Again, this is a reminder that God is indeed sovereign. Yes, we are to be prudent and get our horses ready for the battle of that day. But the outcome always, always rests with God. During this time, the horse and chariot was the most powerful weapon of war. Kings put their faith and their strength in their cavalry. But this beautiful proverb is reminding us we should put our faith in the God of the cross of Calvary. That concludes chapter 21. We will begin next week, chapter 22. Until then, may God bless you and your family with both his grace and peace. Aloha.